We are dealing with a terrorist organization that is committed to racking up as big a death toll as possible when it comes to exterminating residents of the US. That is what we're going to talk about in this 100th episode of Left in Exile. And you heard me right. This regime is committed to the extermination of brown and black people in the US. There's no doubt about it. And if you are wondering, how does that even make sense? Or where do I even come up with that? It's really simple. From day one of this administration, what have we seen? We've seen a callous disregard for anything that involves serving the American public. Think about what this regime has put into place since they took over. They've eliminated anything and everything that is designed to advance and give equal footing for anybody that's a person of color. They've eliminated that. They have shown a willingness to attack the LGBTQIA plus community and particularly the trans community. They have shown a particular affinity for terrorizing any brown or black citizen in the US. And in fact, when you look at what's happening in Los Angeles right now, this is another instance of this administration being committed ethnic cleansing and doubling down on their efforts to commit crimes against humanity. That is where we are today. If you're sitting there and thinking this is just way over the top, think about this. Just over the weekend in LA, this regime over this weekend in LA has detained at least 1,000 people, arrested without warrant, and have smuggled them away in various locations around the city. And the people that they're arresting range anywhere from 7 to 9 year olds all the way to US Marshals that have been captured and trafficked and kidnapped in broad daylight. This is a Gestapo regime. And their criteria for sweeping you up off of the street is if you look like you don't have papers. And the reality of it is that this is happening all across the country. You can follow the disappearances that have happened across the US on the disappeared tracker. And the last time I checked, there's almost 5,000 people that have been disappeared by this regime. And if it weren't for some people's privilege, you would never see or hear from them again. Recently, Kabi Lam, who is famous on TikTok and a global sensation, was scooped up in Las Vegas and potentially disappeared were it not for the fact that somebody actually recognized him. That is where we're at today. If anybody from the age of 7 all the way to US Marshals can be caught in this dragnet, we are living in a dictatorial Nazi state. This is the exact playbook that was run in 1930s Germany. And it's long past the time that we stop ignoring it. With all of that being said, we've seen this coming for years. In fact, the Republican Party at this point should be called the party of death. They are fully committed because they are not raising any rebuttal or any resistance to this regime, to the death toll that they're trying to bring forward. This is a Messianic death cult who looks at this 400-pound fat orange moron as their God and savior. And they're certainly acting like it, because all across the country in town halls, citizens are rising up and holding their elected Republican representatives accountable to upholding the Constitution and protecting the citizens. And what do most of these Republicans do or say? They downplay it. In fact, this from Joni Ernst is a perfect example of Republican mindset in the era of the Trump regime.
When you are arguing about illegal that are receiving Medicaid benefit, the bills pay million, one white house, they are not eligible. So they will become a law. So people are not where we all are going to die.
You just heard and saw Joni Ernst respond to a citizen who is saying that millions of people are going to die as a result of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security being taken away in order to finance the tax cuts that are going to be given to billionaires and millionaires. And her response, everyone's going to die. And here's what makes this worse. She had the opportunity to actually take that back and maybe produce something that was a little bit more reasonable. And what did she choose to do? She doubled and tripled down. Listen to this.
Hello, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely apologize for a statement that I made yesterday at my town hall. See, I was in the process of answering a question that had been asked by an audience member when a woman who was extremely distraught screamed out from the back corner of the auditorium, "People are going to die." And I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well. But for those that would like to see eternal and everlasting life, I encourage you to embrace my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
And that is the perfect example of where the Republican Party is today. They are a party that is committed to the extermination of the citizen. And they are a party that's committed to exterminating as many people that are in the US as possible, as long as they are not white. And even if they are white, some of them will get caught up in it too. Now, you might be hearing all of this and thinking, I'm a citizen, so I'm safe from this. No, you're not. We already have records and data that indicates that citizens are being swept up as well. And in fact, when pressed on it, this regime does nothing but deny. Listen to this.
President has discussed this idea quite a few times publicly. He's also discussed it privately. You're referring to the president's idea for American citizens to potentially be deported. These would be heinous, violent criminals who have broken our nation's laws repeatedly. And these are violent, repeat offenders in American streets. The president has said, if it's legal, right? If there is a legal pathway to do that, he's not sure. We are not sure if there is. It's an idea that he has simply floated and has discussed very publicly as in the effort of transparency.
What you heard is Caroline Leavitt talking about plans that are in place to deport U.S. citizens. This administration is putting plans into place to see what they can get away with. We're getting evidence that this regime doesn't really care about the rule of law. They don't care about due process. They don't care about anything. What they care about is feeding their private prison financiers as much as possible, along with their foreign dictators who are shipping them Bitcoin and crypto by the billions, and seeing how they can work out a relationship where they can ship off the people in the US to foreign concentration camps as part of their extermination plan. That is what this regime cares about. You heard them openly talk about it with the president of El Salvador, Bukele, in the Oval Office. At this point, we have to recognize that this regime is not going to spare anyone. We've seen them go after congressional staffers.
That is not what happened.
Than that. Okay.
What?
Around that.
You didn't have that information, right?
No, I'm gonna.
Hey,
I'm gonna be cute.
do we talk to you?
No.
We got you. We're okay.
I don't have to.
We're okay. You're okay. You're gonna be okay.
I'm gonna cut it off as do we cheers. We have the right to say. I mean, if you
why?
I'm not ridiculous. Well, I'm ridiculous. The Harvard liars in the office.
And what you just saw and heard was ICE officials raiding a congressperson's office and arresting one of their staffers. You've seen them do that. And a congressional staffer is apparently a threat to national security. You've seen them go to LA and try to get access to elementary schools. So 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th graders are now on the radar of ICE as terrorist threats.
And I want to confess to you, for those of you who may not know, I would be a hypocrite if I did not fight for those who today are facing conditions that over 40 years I faced as an undocumented migrant to this country. I want to repeat that. I would be the biggest hypocrite in the world, regardless of my position today, if today I did not fight for those who find themselves in the same predicament I faced over 40 years ago when I arrived in this country at the age of 17 as an undocumented immigrant. Education made me and saved me. I became a teacher, a principal, a superintendent leading the nation's largest districts, 4 times selected as National Superintendent of the Year. Do not underestimate the power of the immigrant child who may very well become an adult who does well and good by America. If I come across with a certain degree of contempt and anger, I am, because Monday, actions were taken in this community that have no place in our city, in our state, or across America. I'm still mystified as to how a first, second, third, fourth, or sixth grader would pose any type of risk to the national security of our nation that would require Homeland Security to deploy its agents to 2 elementary schools.
That is the superintendent of the Los Angeles County School District talking about what ICE has been doing in Los Angeles. There is no question anymore about this regime. It is a full-out Nazi regime committed to the extermination of its people. That is what they're all about. And throughout the regime, you have white supremacists and Nazis all over the place. And you might be wondering, what can we do about this? You saw examples of what can be done in San Diego. And you're starting to see examples of that happen all across the country. Let's keep in mind, ICE has been chased out of Boston, out of Minneapolis, out of Chicago, and now they're trying to make a scene in trying to take over LA, and they're being met with resistance. These are not signs of strength from this administration. This is a complete sign of weakness, and it indicates to you how weak and pathetic this administration is. Let's keep in mind, this administration sent their ICE, Gestapo, and brown shirts into Los Angeles, and peaceful protesters were able to pin them down in a Home Depot. This is an administration that is so clueless that they can't figure out how to escape from a Home Depot, and they want to institute martial law to try to implement their right-wing fascist ideology across the entire country. That is who we're dealing with. But just because they are incompetent doesn't mean that we should be taking them lightly. This is a dire threat to who we are as a country, this entire regime. And when given the opportunity, this entire regime needs to be brought up on charges and put to trial for crimes against humanity, because that is what they're committing right now. Now, as we take inventory of all of this, you might be wondering, what's driving all of this? There's a lot of things that are driving it, but I think you can probably boil it down into its simplest terms. You're dealing with two people of high influence in the regime who are wholly inadequate, who have been called losers and who have been losers their entire lives. At the top of the food chain is Donald Trump. This is a guy who's been a complete loser his entire life. His dad didn't even want him to run the business. He was second choice. His mom thought he was a complete moron. And every woman he's been with has only been with him to either get the bag or because he's had to pay her for it. That is who he is. He was such a detestable loser that the only way that he could get any action was by hanging around Jeffrey Epstein to catch some of his crumbs. So think about that. You are so pathetic and so ill-equipped to do anything that you have to hang out with a serial pedophile to have a chance at getting close to a woman. And you fast forward from there, he got embarrassed on the national stage when he paid off a porn star, and that porn star told the entire world, for everyone to hear, that this guy was packing a tiny little toadstool. So at the top of the food chain is someone who plays the role of tough guy, who always chickens out, who's a complete moron, who wasn't wanted by anybody in his entire life, and he's trying to put on a show of force. The only reason he is where he is because 77 million morons look at that guy as a genius. That tells you how stupid that voter base is. And that's a big part of the reason why all of this is happening, is because you have a loser who's a fake tough guy who's been told that in his entire life that he's great. And he knows he's pathetic. What's happening in LA is a complete display of utter incompetence and weakness. He likes to think this is a show of strength. He's getting shown up by regular citizens stepping out in the front lines and pushing back against his masked brown shirts and Nazis that he's got patrolling the streets. So, who's the second person in charge? A lot of this is driven by Stephen Miller, a person who's had a reputation of being a complete piece of crap, even dating back all the way to high school. Pee Wee German slash half pint Himmler slash knob goblin Goebbels, that's Stephen Miller, a guy who looks like the love child between Voldemort and Gargamel, a guy so lacking in charisma and so incompetent and so unable to satisfy anyone of anything that he lost his wife. His wife left him for a guy who had a botched micropene surgery, wears a diaper, and lost a fight to a senior citizen. How sad and pathetic do you have to be to lose your wife, to have your wife leave you for someone that doesn't even function as a man? That is Stephen Miller. So you can understand why these two losers are so angry. And I would bet somewhere in their history, there are brown and black women who turned them down and laughed at them, which explains why they are the way they are. That is who we're dealing with. And the lesson that we need to take from all of this is that we need to emulate what the citizens of LA, the citizens of Chicago, the citizens of Minneapolis, the citizens of Boston have done, which is fight back, get in the fray. And this is especially true for those of you who are white. White men and white women need to be at the front of the line, because if it's people that look like me and people that are from the black community that are out front, it's going to be a bloodbath. The only reason it hasn't been a bloodbath so far is because white people have been out front. Now, as the escalation from this regime continues, it's going to be increasingly more important that white people man the front lines, because these people are in power because you didn't have the conversations that you needed to have with your grandparents, your parents, your friends, and your relatives. And all of them decided to either sit this one out or figured that this was all blown out of proportion and fear mongering. That is why we are here today. And in fact, if you actually think back, Kamala Harris told you exactly what was going to happen. Listen to this.
Will target and punish those who disagree with him or refuse to bend to his will. He calls these Americans the enemy within and says that he would use the American military to go after American citizens. Journalists whose stories he doesn't like. Nonpartisan election officials who refuse to cheat by finding a few extra votes for him. Judges who insist on following the law instead of following him. It is for reasons like these that General Mark Milley, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Donald Trump's top general, has called Trump, and I quote, fascist to the core.
So where's the lie in anything that Kamala Harris said? There are no lies. She predicted down to the letter what's going to happen. And guess what? It's happening. You have an utterly irredeemable regime in power that told you that this is what they were going to do, and now they're doing it. So now it's up to us to actually demonstrate who the real power is. It's not them. They can call in as many Marines and as National Guard as possible. They know that they cannot win by force. They are counting on all of us to back down and stay home. And that is why it's critical that we take to the streets. Because if we think that this is going to blow over, it's only going to get worse. All you need to do is look at all of the organizations that decided that paying off this regime was probably the best option. And what's happening to them now? They're continuing to get harassed. The only solution is to push forward against the brown shirts, push forward against the Gestapo, push forward against all of these Nazis that are aligned with this regime and trying to bring forward their white nationalist utopia that they are pining for. This is not going to happen. And it's up to us to make sure that we're following the lead of all of those people who have taken to the streets in Boston, in Chicago, in Minneapolis, in Los Angeles, in San Diego. That is our mission. Every city, every citizen, every person in this country that has privilege needs to stand up and push back against this Nazi regime.